She was sitting alone at twin sister's wedding until a billionaire said, "Pretend you're with me." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. She sat alone at the wedding of her twin sister, the golden lights of the ballroom spilling across polished marble floors. Laughter echoed under the chandelier. Crystal glasses clinked, and violins hummed a waltz that seemed to mock her silence. Maya adjusted the strap of her pale dress, one she had borrowed from a coworker, and stared at her hands folded on her lap. She was surrounded by joy, yet untouched by it, like a ghost at a celebration. Her sister, radiant in lace, glided through the crowd on the arm of her new husband. Relatives whispered, their eyes darting toward Maya's empty seat at the family table. Poor Maya, always in the shadow. Could not even bring a date. Each glance cut deeper than the next. She kept her eyes down, willing herself invisible. Her chest tightened. She should have left after the ceremony, but she stayed, telling herself it was her duty to witness her sister's happiness. Yet every laugh, every toast, reminded her of what she lacked: stability, respect, love. She was a teacher, scraping by on overdue rent and leftover takeout. A woman used to second-hand shoes and bargain coats, suddenly dropped into a palace of champagne and silk. The band struck a louder note, and the crowd swirled into pairs on the dance floor. Maya's chair remained still, pushed back against the wall. She could feel her loneliness glowing under the chandeliers, as if a spotlight followed her every movement. She swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of humiliation. Then, a shadow fell across her table. A man in a tailored black suit stood before her, tall and poised, his dark eyes scanning the room before locking onto hers. His presence shifted the air, pulling the background noise into a hush. He leaned slightly forward, his voice calm yet commanding, a whisper sharpened with confidence. "Pretend you are with me." For a moment, Maya thought she had misheard. Her lips parted, but no words formed. Who was he? Why her? The scent of his cologne cedar, clean and sharp, filled the silence between them. He did not repeat himself, only extended a hand, waiting. Her heart pounded so hard she feared it might be heard above the music. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to shrink back, but the eyes around the room burned like coals against her skin. Accepting meant escape from pity, from whispers. Refusing meant another long night under the weight of judgment. Slowly, almost against her will, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was steady, certain, pulling her upright with effortless strength. As he guided her toward the center of the floor, whispers rippled across the tables, heads turned. The spotlight that once mocked her now followed them both. Maya's breath hitched. She had no idea who he was. But she knew one thing, with certainty: this man was not asking, he was deciding. And with every step, her world shifted further from the quiet life she had known. The violin swelled, their bodies aligned. And as the music carried them into the heart of the crowd, Maya realized this night was not about her sister's wedding anymore. It was about a stranger's command that would rewrite the course of her life. The music slowed, but Maya's heartbeat did not. She let the stranger guide her across the floor, his hand resting firmly at her back. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow them. She tried to steady her breathing, but her pulse echoed in her ears louder than the violins. His gaze stayed forward, calm, practiced, as if he had walked into this ballroom for the sole purpose of claiming her. When the song ended, applause rippled through the hall. Maya tried to step back, to return to her seat, but he kept her hand in his. "Come with me," he murmured, almost like an order rather than a request. Before she knew it, he was leading her out of the ballroom and into the cool night air of the hotel terrace. The city skyline glittered in the distance, skyscrapers standing like silent witnesses. She pulled her hand free and finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" The man's dark eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. Adrian Cole. He let the name hang in the air, as though it explained everything. Maya blinked. The name tugged at something faintly familiar. She had heard it before, whispered in news clips and articles about the billionaire who had built an empire in technology before the age of 35. She had seen his face on the covers of magazines while waiting in grocery store lines. But seeing him here, in person, so close that she could hear the calm rhythm of his breath, was almost unreal. "You should not have been sitting alone in there," Adrian said, adjusting the cuff of his jacket as though to soften the remark. "It gave people something to talk about. And I do not like to be the subject of talk," Maya frowned, crossing her arms. "That does not explain why you pulled me into this little charade." He studied her for a moment, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly, not in amusement but in calculation. "Because you were the only one who looked honest. And right now, I need someone honest." Her pulse quickened again. "For what?" Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek silver business card case. He slipped a single card into her hand. The embossed letters read, "Adrian Cole, Cole Industries." Below the name, a line in gold, "CEO and Chairman." Maya's mouth went dry. She almost laughed, but the seriousness in his eyes silenced her. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. "I am very serious," Adrian replied. He leaned against the railing, the city lights painting sharp lines across his face. "I need a companion for a series of public events. Someone to sit beside me, smile when the cameras flash, and silence questions that do not concern my work. In short, I need a fiancé, temporarily." Maya froze. The word fiancé echoed in her mind like thunder. She glanced down at the card again, half expecting the letters to vanish. "This is insane," she said at last, shaking her head. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Adrian said smoothly. "You are not like them. You are not chasing a headline or a payout. You looked like you wanted to disappear in that room, and yet you stood up when I asked. That tells me you are willing to play along, even under pressure." Maya wanted to protest, to throw the card back at him and walk away. But then her thoughts turned unbidden to her life, outside this glittering hotel. The past due rent notice pinned to her refrigerator. The stack of unpaid medical bills for her mother's treatment. The constant comparisons to her twin sister, the perfect one, the married one. Adrian's voice cut through her thoughts. "There will be terms, clear boundaries. You will be compensated fairly. And when it is over, you walk away with no strings attached." She narrowed her eyes. "You are asking me to sell myself." His expression hardened for the first time. "I am asking you to agree to a contract. Nothing more, nothing less." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of traffic far below. Maya looked at the card in her hand again, the weight of it pressing heavier than paper should. "You expect me to just say yes?" she whispered. "No," Adrian said, his voice even. "I expect you to think about it. But do not take too long. The offer does not stand forever." He straightened, buttoning his jacket, and with one last measured look, he walked back inside, leaving Maya alone on the terrace. The night air bit at her skin. She stared at the card, the name gleaming under the light of the chandelier spilling through the windows. Her fingers trembled. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that her life had just taken a turn she could never undo. Maya slipped the card into her purse, pressed a hand to her chest, and whispered into the empty night. "What have I gotten myself into?" Maya could not sleep that night. The glow of the city poured through her apartment window, but all she saw was the silver card with Adrian Cole's name pressed into it. She turned it over in her hands again and again, as if it might change into something ordinary. But it did not. It remained heavy, cold, and terrifying. The next morning, she dragged herself into her small classroom. Her students' laughter filled the walls, bright and unfiltered. And for a moment it steadied her. Yet when she collected their homework, her eyes drifted to the unpaid bills tucked inside her planner. Her paycheck never stretched far enough. Rent, utilities, and her mother's medical treatments had drained what little savings she had. The card burned in her purse like a secret she was not ready to share. That evening, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Hesitating, she answered. The voice on the other end was crisp and formal. "Miss Bennett, this is Claire, assistant to Mr. Cole. He asked me to confirm a meeting tomorrow at 7 in the evening. Location has been sent to your email." Maya's heart stumbled. "Wait, I never agreed. Mr. Cole requests your presence. It will be worth your while." The line went dead. The next day, Maya found herself standing in front of a sleek glass tower downtown. Coal Industries. The name stretched across the building like it owned the sky itself. She clutched her purse tighter, telling herself she should turn around. Yet her feet carried her through the revolving doors and into a marble lobby that smelled faintly of polished stone and power. A receptionist led her to the top floor, where the city sprawled beneath her in glittering lines. Adrian waited in a private office, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows. He rose when she entered, perfectly composed, his suit pressed without a wrinkle. "Maya," he said, as though they were already familiar. "Thank you for coming." She swallowed hard. "I did not have much of a choice, did I?" He ignored the jab and gestured for her to sit. A folder lay on the desk between them. "This," he said, sliding it toward her, "is the agreement. Read it carefully." Her fingers hesitated on the folder before flipping it open. The contract was written in precise language, each clause heavy with consequence. She skimmed through the points. Accompany him to no fewer than 5 public events. Maintain the image of a committed relationship. Refrain from discussing personal matters with the press, and keep all details strictly confidential. Compensation, a sum that made her head spin, enough to erase her debts, pay her mother's medical bills, and start over with room to breathe. "This is absurd," she said, pushing the papers back toward him. "You are asking me to lie to everyone." Adrian leaned back, his expression cool but his eyes sharp. "It is not lying. It is an arrangement. A role. You act, the world believes, and both of us benefit. Do you not think people act every day? At weddings, at work, even at family dinners?" Maya clenched her fists. "Why me? You could have anyone." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like a puzzle. "Because you are not anyone. You are not chasing the spotlight. You are not dazzled by my money. Last night you looked like you wanted to vanish, and yet you stood with me anyway. That makes you unpredictable, real, exactly what I need." The words unsettled her more than she expected. She tried to steady her voice. "And when it is over, then you walk away," Adrian said simply. "Debt-free, free to live however you wish. No strings." The silence stretched between them. Maya stared down at the folder, her chest tight. Her pride screamed to refuse, to run out of the building and never look back. But the image of her mother in the clinic bed pressed harder than pride. The landlord's voice, cold and final, echoed in her memory. She did not have the luxury of walking away. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "And if I say yes?" For the first time, Adrian's expression shifted. Not triumph, not arrogance, but something close to relief. He reached for a pen, sliding it across the desk toward her. "Then you sign. And we begin." Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. The paper seemed to blur before her eyes. She pressed the tip down and scrawled her name across the line. The moment the ink dried, a weight settled on her chest, heavier than before. Adrian stood, extending his hand. "Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Bennett." Maya placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, final. She felt the ground beneath her shift, as if the world she had known until now had been pulled away. As she left the office that night, the city lights below seemed sharper, colder. In her purse, the contract rustled like chains. She whispered to herself in the empty elevator, "This is not real. It cannot be real." But deep down, she knew it was real. Too real. And it had only just begun. The following week passed in a blur that felt nothing like her ordinary life. Maya found herself swept into a current she could not control. One morning she was grading spelling tests in her small classroom, and by evening she was standing inside a penthouse suite with a view that seemed to stretch across the whole city. Adrian had arranged everything with cold efficiency. A driver picked her up after work, a stylist waited with racks of gowns, and an etiquette coach corrected every word and gesture. Maya had never imagined such a transformation. She stood in front of a mirror, wearing a deep navy dress that caught the light with every movement. The shoes fit perfectly, unlike the thrift store pairs that always rubbed her ankles raw. For the first time in her life, she looked like she belonged in a world of chandeliers and champagne. But inside, her nerves rattled. Each lesson felt like a performance she would eventually fail. The coach drilled her on how to walk into a gala, how to smile at photographers without showing nerves, and how to answer invasive questions with grace. "Keep it simple," the coach said. "Deflect with charm. And remember, people are watching to judge him, not you. You are his shield." Maya's stomach twisted at the thought. She had agreed to this, but standing in front of the mirror, she wondered if she was losing herself in the process. That night, Adrian appeared at the door. He wore a black suit, his tie fixed with a precision that seemed almost military. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, a short nod. "It will do." Maya's cheeks burned. She wanted to snap back, to remind him she was not some mannequin to be inspected. But she bit her tongue. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The gala was held in a sprawling museum, the kind of place Maya had only seen in magazines. Lights dripped from the ceiling like falling stars, and music rolled through the halls. Guests arrived in cars that gleamed like liquid metal, stepping out in diamonds and silk. The air smelled of roses, wine, and money. Maya's heart pounded as photographers snapped the moment she stepped out of the car with Adrian. Flashes blinded her, voices shouted questions, and all she could do was hold on to his arm. Adrian leaned slightly toward her, his voice low and steady. "Smile. You are safe, as long as you stay close." She forced her lips into a smile, hoping it did not look as strained as it felt. The cameras clicked, and for a fleeting moment, she saw herself through their lenses. No longer the forgotten twin, no longer the poor teacher, but someone important, someone worth noticing. Inside the gala, the room shimmered with golden glass. Adrian moved through the crowd like he owned it. And perhaps he did. People gravitated to him, nodding, smiling, eager for a word. Maya stayed close, reminding herself that her only job was to appear supportive and silent. But then it happened. A journalist approached, recorder in hand, eyes sharp with curiosity. "Miss Bennett," he said, ignoring Adrian entirely. "How did you two meet?" Maya froze. Her mind went blank. She had not rehearsed this part. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The silence stretched, and she felt the weight of the entire room turning toward her. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not step in. He was testing her. In a rush of panic, Maya forced a laugh. "We met by accident," she said, her voice trembling. "At a wedding, he asked me to pretend I was with him, and I said yes." The reporter's eyebrows shot up. A few people nearby chuckled, but Maya smiled wider, forcing warmth into her words. "It sounds ridiculous, but sometimes the best things start that way." A murmur spread through the group. The tension broke. The journalist smiled and lowered his recorder. "Well, that is certainly memorable." Relief flooded her chest. Adrian's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, his hand brushing against hers, as if in silent approval. As the evening wore on, Maya found herself moving more easily through the room. She laughed at conversations, accepted glasses of champagne, and even caught Adrian watching her once or twice, his eyes holding a trace of something she could not name. Later, as the gala ended, Adrian guided her back toward the waiting car. The night air was crisp, and the city pulsed with light. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You surprised me tonight." Maya looked up at him, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Good surprise or bad surprise? His lips curved faintly, almost into a smile. Good. For the first time since this arrangement began, warmth spread through her chest. But as the driver pulled the car away from the curb, she pressed her hands together in her lap. She reminded herself that this was still a contract, a performance, nothing more. And yet, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind, what if it was becoming something else? The following weeks blurred into a routine that never felt real. By day, Maya still stood in front of chalkboards, teaching multiplication tables and correcting essays. But by night she stepped into gowns, heels, and glittering halls. Each event was another stage where she and Adrian performed the role of a perfect couple. Yet, the longer it went on, the more Maya noticed the cracks. Adrian was precise, careful, always maintaining control. But behind the calm mask, there were flashes of something else, weariness, perhaps even loneliness. She found herself searching for those moments when the facade slipped, even if only for seconds. One evening, they attended a formal dinner hosted by a group of shareholders. The ballroom buzzed with men in tuxedos and women in satin, every smile sharpened like a blade. Maya sat beside Adrian at the long table, trying to steady her nerves. A man across from them, silver-haired and smug, leaned forward. "So, Miss Bennet," he said with a smirk, "tell us, how does a schoolteacher capture the heart of Adrian Cole?" The table chuckled, the sound biting. Maya's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Perhaps the same way a teacher captures the attention of restless children, by refusing to be ignored." The table erupted in laughter, not at her expense this time, but with her. Adrian's lips twitched, his hand brushing against hers under the table in a subtle gesture of approval. Still, Maya knew the danger had only begun. Every event felt like a trial, a test she had not studied for. Adrian never interfered, never rescued her from the spotlight. He watched instead, as if her ability to survive in his world was the real contract. Later that night, after the dinner ended, Maya and Adrian stepped out onto the balcony of the skyscraper venue. The city stretched endless beneath them, lights scattered like constellations. The noise of the party faded behind glass doors. Adrian loosened his tie and leaned against the railing. For once, he looked less like the untouchable billionaire, and more like a man who had carried too much weight for too long. "You handled yourself well in there," he said. Maya exhaled slowly. "You could have helped. I needed to see what you would do." His honesty startled her. She turned to him. "And what did you see?" Adrian's eyes lingered on her face. "That you are braver than you think." The words caught her off guard, warming something deep inside her chest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city wind tangled through her hair, and she let it stay, not caring about appearances. Adrian's voice broke the silence, softer than before. "I used to come up to rooftops like this as a kid, when the noise at home was too much, when the shouting would not stop. I would stare at the lights and imagine that somewhere out there was a different life. A better one." Maya's heart tightened. This was the first time he had revealed anything personal, a glimpse of the boy behind the empire. She wanted to reach out, to place her hand on his, but she hesitated. The rules of their arrangement echoed in her mind. No crossing boundaries, no blurring lines. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe that better life is still waiting for you." For the first time, Adrian smiled, small, fleeting, but real. The moment lingered until the doors behind them opened and voices spilled out, dragging them back into the performance. Adrian straightened his tie, the mask sliding back into place. But as they returned to the crowd, Maya carried his words with her, tucked away like a fragile secret. She knew something had shifted. The contract was still in place, the terms still binding. Yet the line between pretend and real was already beginning to blur. The illusion held for a time, but perfection never lasts. By the third month of their arrangement, the whispers began. Headlines appeared with her name printed in bold letters beside his. Photographers followed her, leaving her classroom, snapping pictures of her modest clothes, her second-hand car, the simple apartment building where she lived. Commentators asked how a billionaire could possibly be serious about a woman like her. Maya tried to ignore it, but the weight of judgment grew heavier each day. Even her students whispered when they thought she could not hear. She reminded herself this was temporary, that when the contract ended, she would return to her quiet life with debts erased. But a voice inside her asked whether she could ever truly go back. One Friday evening, Adrian invited her to accompany him to a charity gala at a historic hotel downtown. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, walls lined with gilded mirrors. Maya wore a gown Adrian's stylist had chosen, emerald silk that clung to her like water. She entered on his arm, smiling for cameras, every step rehearsed. For most of the night, she played her part seamlessly. But near the end, as speeches filled the hall, a journalist cornered her near the refreshment table. His recorder was already on. "Miss Bennet, people are saying your relationship with Mr. Cole is staged, that it is a publicity stunt to soften his image. Care to comment?" The words froze her. She glanced around for Adrian, but he was across the room speaking with investors. Alone, she felt the room closing in. She forced a smile. "They can say what they want. What matters is what we know." The journalist smirked, leaning closer. "And what do you know exactly? That you are his fiancée in name only? That you were plucked out of obscurity to play this role?" The air rushed from her lungs. She could not answer without exposing the truth. Before she could find words, a camera flashed. The journalist stepped back with a satisfied look, already certain he had captured her hesitation. Later that night, Maya confronted Adrian in the back of the car as the city lights streaked past the windows. "They are tearing me apart," she said, her voice trembling. "They follow me to work. They humiliate me in print. I cannot do this anymore." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That is the price of being with me." "No," she snapped, surprising herself with the sharpness of her tone. "That is the price of pretending. You told me it was just an arrangement, but you never told me it would feel like living a lie every single day." He looked at her then, not with anger but with something like regret. "I thought you could handle it." Her chest tightened. "I am not made of stone, Adrian. I am not your shield. I am just me." The car fell silent. The divide between them had never felt wider. That weekend, the tabloids exploded with the story. Grainy photos of her hesitation splashed across headlines. "The teacher who cannot keep up." "Adrian Cole's fake fiancé." The whispers turned to shouts. Adrian's board demanded answers. His family, rarely visible, began circling with questions. Maya sat in her apartment, the emerald gown still hanging in her closet like a reminder of her failure. She pressed her face into her hands and whispered, "What have I done?" The knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Adrian stood there, his expression unreadable, his suit jacket thrown over one arm, as if he had come straight from a meeting. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "You cannot stay here. It is not safe anymore." Maya stared at him, torn between anger and fear. But in his eyes she saw something she had not expected: genuine concern. For the first time, she wondered if the lines of their contract had already shattered beyond repair. Maya packed her bag with shaking hands, unsure if she was running from danger or from herself. Adrian waited in the doorway, his presence filling the room as though the walls had been holding their breath. She wanted to tell him to leave, to demand answers, but instead she followed him down the narrow hallway and out into the night. A black car idled at the curb. The driver opened the door, and Adrian gestured for her to get in. The ride was silent, the city blurring past like streaks of gold and shadow. Finally, the car pulled up before iron gates that swung open without hesitation. Beyond them rose an estate so vast it looked like another world. The mansion loomed with towering columns and windows that gleamed in the moonlight. Inside, the halls stretched wide, lined with portraits and polished stone. It was silent except for the faint echo of their footsteps. Maya clutched her bag tighter, feeling smaller with each step. Adrian led her into a private sitting room. A fire glowed low in the hearth, painting his face in flickers of light. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You will stay here until the noise dies down." Maya dropped her bag onto a chair. "You brought me here like I am some fragile thing to be hidden away. But what happens when the noise does not die down?" His gaze hardened. "Then we fight it." She shook her head. "Fight it with what, Adrian? With more lies? With more pretending?" Her voice cracked as the words tumbled out. "I cannot breathe in this world of yours. Every step feels like I am performing on a stage that does not belong to me." For the first time, his composure slipped. He ran a hand through his hair, turning away as though the fire might give him strength. "Do you think it belongs to me? Every dinner, every headline, every deal, I am performing too, Maya. The only difference is that I have been doing it so long. I forgot what it means to be real." The confession hung heavy between them. Maya's anger softened, but the ache in her chest did not. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Then why drag me into it?" Adrian looked at her, his eyes shadowed with something close to fear. "Because with you, I thought maybe I could remember. And I was wrong to think it would not cost you everything." The honesty struck her deeper than any of his polished words ever had. She wanted to believe him, wanted to reach for him, but the sting of humiliation and exhaustion was stronger. Maya picked up her bag again. "Maybe I should go. Maybe this was a mistake from the start." Adrian's jaw clenched. He stepped forward as if to stop her, then froze, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "If you walk away now, the tabloids will eat you alive. They will not just call you a liar, they will make sure you can never go back to the life you had." Her breath caught. The truth of it wrapped around her like chains. She hated that he was right. The fire crackled, the silence sharp. Finally, Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay, Maya. Not because of the contract. Stay because I do not want to lose the only person who makes any of this feel real. Her chest ached at the plea, raw and unguarded. But she turned away, blinking hard against the tears. She did not answer. The choice still hung in the air, unfinished, as the flames dimmed and the mansion swallowed them both in silence. The storm came faster than either of them expected. Within days, a tabloid released the story in full. Photographs of Maya's apartment, details of her salary as a teacher, and a headline that screamed, "Adrian Cole's fiancé is a fraud." The article shredded her dignity, portraying her as a schemer who clung to wealth she did not deserve. Maya sat in the grand sitting room of Adrian's mansion. The newspaper spread across her lap, her hands trembling as she read the words. Each sentence carved deeper into her chest. She whispered to herself, "They hate me. They hate me because I do not belong here." Adrian found her like that, shoulders hunched, eyes wet with unshed tears. For once, the armor in his voice cracked. "Maya, listen to me. None of this changes who you are." She lifted her head sharply. "It changes everything. You told me I was just playing a part, but now it feels like I have lost myself. I cannot tell where the performance ends and where I begin." He stepped closer, his expression raw, stripped of his usual control. "Then let us end the performance. No contracts, no pretending. Just us." Maya's heart stuttered. The words she had longed to hear were finally spoken, but the timing was cruel. The world outside saw her as a fraud. Even if she accepted his confession, would anyone ever believe it was real? She shook her head, her voice breaking. "You waited too long. Now it looks like I am staying because of the money, because of the scandal. They will never see the truth." Adrian's hands curled at his sides, desperation flashing across his face. "Then I will show them. I will show them all that you are the only truth I have." But Maya turned away, unable to hold his gaze. "You cannot fix this with money or power. Maybe you cannot fix it at all." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Adrian stood motionless, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed. Maya gathered the torn newspaper and pressed it to her chest like a wound. She whispered, almost too softly for him to hear, "Maybe this was never meant to be." That night, she returned to her room alone. For the first time since signing the contract, she wished she could erase the moment she placed her name on that line. The mansion's walls felt colder, emptier, and the distance between them stretched wider than ever before. Days passed in silence. Maya avoided the grand halls of the mansion, hiding in her room, while Adrian buried himself in meetings that stretched late into the night. Yet beneath the stillness, both of them knew the story could not end this way. One Monday morning, Maya returned to her classroom, determined to reclaim some fragment of her old life. The children greeted her with smiles, but she felt their curious stares. On her desk lay a folded note, slipped under the door. No signature, only a message. "Come to the auditorium after school." Her hands shook as she walked in that afternoon. The room was transformed. On the stage, easels stood in a row, each holding photographs of her candid moments, not the polished images from tabloids. Maya laughing with her students, Maya adjusting a child's drawing, Maya standing in a thrift store coat under the rain. At the center stood Adrian, dressed simply, without the armor of his suits. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the quiet room. "The world has painted you as someone false, but I wanted them to see the truth. This is who you are, Maya Bennett. The woman who gives more than she has, the woman who stood by me when she could have walked away. And if they cannot see your worth, then I will spend every day proving it." Her breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out not a diamond ring, but the folded wedding invitation from her sister's wedding the night they first met. He held it like a promise. "This was the beginning of our mistake. But it is the best mistake of my life. Maya, will you marry me? Not as a contract, not as a shield, but as the woman I love?" Tears blurred her vision. The walls of doubt, the fear of whispers, melted away beneath the weight of his words. Slowly, she walked onto the stage, her voice trembling. "Yes, Adrian, this time, for real." The students who had quietly gathered at the back erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the auditorium. For the first time, Maya did not feel out of place. She felt chosen, and as Adrian slipped the invitation into her hands like a vow, she knew the story of pretend had ended. What remained was the truth of a love that no headline could ever erase.